All kinds of things going on in the world. I'll tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll bring in the panel. And I saw that we did have Dan Worthington, and of course, my good friend Chris Greco here as well. But definitely, there are a number of things happening in the world. We'll share a little bit of the news of what I have found, and then we'll get to discussions that they may have in mind as well. And then we'll see what other guests pop in also as we continue the discussions around world affairs and things here in the United States. We do know that a week from today is election day. So that is one of the things that I'm sure that we may get into coverage and all of that. But if we're talking about the world, well, it looks like Bolsonaro is remaining silent after his loss in the Brazilian presidential election. But Brazilian truckers are creating multiple blockades in support of Bolsonaro. So that could be adding to some problems in a country that is already having severe economic woes and all in that line. And then over there in Israel, morning turnout is at its highest since 1999 as Israelis vote for the fifth time amid a deadlock. And yes, Netanyahu is hoping to return to power. So that is one of the things that we are seeing in that sense. And of course, we may have some folks that have some thoughts around that as well. If you think that you're out of danger with tropical storms, not so fast. Tropical storm Melissa is expected to become a hurricane by early Wednesday. So that would be tomorrow. And it could be striking the country of Belize as a hurricane. And we'll see what other kind of tracks it goes and whether it decides to hit parts of the United States or what goes on in that space as well. And the China leader Xi is saying that China will build a stable supply chain with what they are calling Comrade Vietnam. And Germany is finalizing details of a planned gas price cap. And definitely one of the Russian tycoons has renounced his citizenship over the Ukraine war, that being Oleg Tinkov. So that particular billionaire is saying that he is junking that particular citizenship. And definitely, I'm sure that folks will be paying attention to see if any of the other tycoons do something similar, or tycoons, I should say, do something similar, or if he's just one of a few. But we'll wait and see how that plays out. China has launched its third and final space module to complete its space station. So they're joining the whole space war. And we sometimes wonder how immigration impacts other countries as well. But right now, Loke Rasmussen is at the center of Danish politics once again, and he's taken a hard line on immigration. So this hardline stance on immigration isn't just an issue here in the United States, but it's an issue in other places as well. And definitely the Black Sea deal suspension looks like that's going to be driving up grain and meat prices in the Asia Pacific area as well. And I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I was watching some of the TV commercials, ads for the campaigns. And yes, that lovely subject of race, or rice as we like to call it here on the network, was featured in two of them. I noticed that Ted Budd was trying to paint certain people in certain ways in terms of the racial aspect. And then I actually saw a pro Bud commercial that was actually featuring somebody from the Indian community, and they were actually painting the way that racism was going against their community. And I had not seen that ad, but it was definitely quite interesting to see that kind of position and the way that that ad was handled. So like I said, I was checking that out on last night and all in that space. Maybe Chris and other people have some thoughts around that, and who knows, I might even try to pull up the ad because it was definitely an interesting ad that I saw, and definitely was one that was quite fascinating. By the way, the Philippine death toll from Storm Analogy, we were talking about storms earlier, has risen to 98, according to a disaster agency over there. And guess what? Yes, folks are warning about we're not quite being out of the whole COVID flu thing, because officials are warning of a COVID flu twindemic as life returns to normal. So that is one of the things that they're saying with COVID, flu, and RSV. And this is actually coming out of Delaware. They should actually be looking at a twindemic. And I do know that other people are looking at that as well, meaning other parts of the country and other parts of the world. And Norway has raised military alert in response to the Ukraine war and things in that space. So that's just some of the headlines I saw. I may get to some of the ones from the news that is coming out of the United States, including election news and all in that space. But I'm going to bring in Chris Greco, see if he's got anything to say about what I did bring up. Like I said, we were just bringing up a few things that I was able to pull up since Steve is out of pocket on today's particular day, the 1st of November, which is also known as All Saints Day, if I remember correctly, the day after Halloween. And that is sometimes an opportunity for many countries to celebrate their ancestors and folks that have passed on and all in that space. I know it's very popular in certain Latin American countries, and I think it's popular in other parts of the world as well. But definitely, as one that believes in the connection to those that have passed on, we definitely want to put our not just condolences, but our kind of like support of those that are remembering their family members that have passed on. Because in my mind, that's what All Saints Day is about. It is a chance to honor those that have passed on, but that are still part of your family tree, the world tree, and all along those lines. But Chris, I don't know if you have any thoughts about All Saints Day or some of the other news stories that I brought in. And of course, I'll also bring in our good friend, Dan Worthington, as well. So hope everybody is doing well and that everybody is just paying attention to this lovely world that we're in and everything. You know, in 3 weeks, it's hard to believe it'll be actually Turkey Day. So 3 weeks and 2 days. So
amazing.
Around the corner, and you know, the year has just kind of like flown by.
I'm thinking about starting to celebrate Thanksgiving now.
Good idea.
3 weeks of Thanksgiving. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, you go from candy to turkey. What's the difference, right?
Yeah.
They both put you in a coma.
By the way, breaking news. Chief Roberts just put a stay on the order for Trump to release these tax returns to Congress.
Wow.
This couldn't get any more fun.
Wow.
So you know, it may be that he'll be able to lay this enough for the Republicans to take over the House and the Democratic bums get kicked out of power.
Well, you know, I noticed something, Mark, when you were talking about. I want to talk about a little bit international stuff, but before we do that, I want to talk about the phraseology. The phraseology is interesting right now. I've noticed my friends and my relatives, you know, that are Democrat or independent, but they're really Democrat, and they talk about, the corruption on both sides of the aisle and the problems with both sides of the aisle, and they need to get rid of both sides of the aisle. And if you notice that more, and you've probably heard this, right? More and more and more, both sides of the aisle, both sides. But when Trump was president, it was all about the Republicans. We got to get rid of the Republicans. Republicans are bad. Republicans are bad, you know, and then Cheney and the rest of them, you know, January 6th, and insurgency, we got, Republicans on the far right, and we got to get rid of them. But now all of a sudden, because the Democrats are in trouble, and they are in trouble, all of a sudden it's both sides of the aisle. Like, oh, we need a new, a whole new wash away to be able to make that work. I mean, have you heard that?
I can agree with the phraseology, and definitely that has been going on for a while, and a lot of phraseology can exist in that space. But one of the other things that I've been noticing, and it's actually not just with Trump, it was actually surprisingly, Dan may not agree with this. I would argue that it was with Obama and to some degree with Clinton and some of the other folks out there. I personally think that, and yes, I will use that phrase again, both sides of the aisle, and particularly the common citizen, are frustrated with politics in general. I personally think that is why, quote unquote, anti-establishment candidates have been doing so well lately and all of that. And that is both Trump and Obama. Obama was seen as a community activist, not really ingrained that much in the political scene in the sense of the normal way. And definitely, and we can even go back to Jimmy Carter now to think about it, because he was a peanut farmer and all in that space. And definitely Trump is one as well. But I think that folks, particularly in, what do they call it, like mainland America, and just some of the parts that are in the heart of the U.S. and just around the country, and I think it's actually around the world, because I think that's why some of these other leaders are coming in power as well, are just totally frustrated with establishment gridlock and the fact that it's not really doing any impact on their day-to-day life. Rising rents are going up. I know that my rent is going up.
I think you're right about people being tired of the political parties and the same old rhetoric.
Right.
I don't know. You see, you're progressive,
Yes.
and so you'd be against gridlock. I'm a conservative, so I'm for gridlock. And the reason I'm for gridlock is it keeps anything bad from happening or one party taking advantage of the other. And I kind of like having the balance of power. That's how the Constitution was set up, is to prevent mobocracy from taking over in the United States. And there's just as much corruption with the non-traditional candidates. Look at AOC and some of the squad. There are skeletons in their closet that they've discovered. One of them being married to her brother and all this other BS. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And so I have taken the point that I think most politicians are corrupt, and politics is corrupt, and it has to do with the dark money and the money everybody's taken under the table or that they get when they leave office. And that practice has to stop.
But how can we? No, I agree.
Stop the money, and the lobbyists and the others who are using it to, I had a senior partner in a law firm who used to be a lobbyist on the Hill, and they would arrange hookers and other things for the congressmen and that kind of thing. Then they'd use that to be able to bribe them to do influence peddling. Epstein was big into the same thing. That's what he was all about, right? Is about trying to have the goods on people and be able to bribe them. That's how he built his fortune, is through that very means. And so the problem is in our political system is we've allowed corruption to enter in. And we've also allowed this divisiveness to creep in. And it's a political device that the parties are using to divide us. So, Mark, you and I are buddies, right?
Yeah, we're definitely buddies.
Yeah. And I mean, all this racism and stuff is used as a political device to divide us.
No, I can see that. Definitely racism.
When Obama was president, I had great hope that finally, we're going to have a United States based on the concept of race. He made it worse with all the rhetoric and everything that he was creating during that whole thing. Occupy, all this other stuff. There were more race riots during his presidency, other than, the stuff that happened pre-election than practically anybody. And since the 60s, I don't get it.
There's definitely been racism out there for a while, and it's definitely been continued. I don't know that I can give him Occupy, because I remember the history, and I was actually involved to some degree with that and everything. Actually, a lot of degrees, because I went to a lot of those meetings. And
he's a community organizer. He was behind all that.
That's an interesting concept. No,
and Arab Spring and all that.
The Occupy movement, as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, did the Occupy movement actually come out of another country? Because I believe the Occupy movement actually started overseas and then moved its way to the United States. It was kind of like Brexit. I think Occupy.
There was a lot of influence from the Occupy movement from overseas, or specifically Greece. There was some influencing from Greece, because they occupied some areas that they said, look, we're not going to get retirement, then we're going to occupy these areas. But to get back to your point, Dan, the bottom line here is that it always falls on the leaders. It always falls on the leaders, the leadership aspect and what's going on there, whether it be a governor, president, or whatever else. I mean, and I get it. I get it why people want to blame Trump. He was the leader of the country. So he can sit there and he can say whatever he wants, but the responsibility for whatever happened, bad or good, is on him. Same with Biden. Biden was more than happy to have his chief of staff come out and say, we had 36,000 on the Dow, 36,000, first time ever. Oh, yay me, yay me, yay me. And I wrote back on the Twitter and I said, really? So when it falls down below 32,000, are you gonna take blame for that? course not. It's going to be, it's going to be, hey, look at me, I did something good, but it's 28, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, not my problem. This is and it's certainly not a recession. Never will be a recession until the Republicans take power, and then of course they're going to call it a recession.
We're going to call it a recession.
Speaking of whether it's a recession or not, hold on one second. Speaking of whether it's a recession or not, actually, and I do want to get to some of the other countries that you were going to mention and everything, and I don't want to take too much time on it because we will have a show on it later as well on this particular day. But Sasha, I did see that there is a lot of talk and conversation about Russia pulling out of this whole safe export of Ukrainian grain and all in that space. So they are saying that after they did that, it's going to cause a spike in global wheat prices, and it definitely is going to raise fresh concern over food shortages, especially in the developing world. So I was just wondering, as one that has been definitely very closely following the war, whether this will be a turning point in the war and whether it's something that we in the West and just around the world need to be concerned about, because definitely they were saying that they were suspending their part after an attack this weekend on the Black Sea Fleet over Crimea, which of course they blamed Ukrainian drones for, and this whole kind of notion of who did what and all in that space. But I'm just wondering, is this something that the entire nation and the entire world should be concerned about, and your thoughts?
Well, there are two possible scenarios, and it's all in the hands of the NATO and the United States. One is to prolong the war as long as possible, make it really, really long war. As a result, Russia will be weakened to so much, politically, economically, militarily. I mean, from any aspects of it, so it will be basically redundant for a foreseeable future. Another way to deal with that is to save lives, to finish this war ASAP. However, there are no agreements possible with Putin. He's a complete maniac. He's lost touch with reality. It's evident from his recent speech on last Thursday. So if enough ammunition and weapons will be supplied to Ukrainian forces, they can easily overtake and push Russian armies out from the Ukrainian territories. That's very possible scenario, but I'm not so sure which scenario is better from the West or US point of view. To continue slowly to weaken Russia farther and farther, or just give it decisive blow and finish the war. I'm not so sure. Both are very favorable for the West and for the United States scenarios. Which one they will choose, it's really up to them. Ukraine has very little say in which scenario will be really taking the place. That's my opinion.
Appreciate that. Hey, Chris, you had mentioned that there were some things in the world, particularly in the African nations, that you wanted to bring up. And of course, I wanted to hear some of those. And of course, we want to get to some of the other things that are going on in the world as well, including right here in the United States. But I definitely wanted to hear some of those thoughts that you had in that space and all along those lines.
Sure. Just put up my share screen real quick, Mark, if you would, please. And
I can definitely do that.
Okay, so this is Africa. There's some major issues that are happening. The DR of the Congo, which is there's the Republic of Congo, and then there's Democratic Republic of Congo. And basically, what's happening is that Rwanda is the Democratic Republic of Congo told the Rwanda ambassador to get out. They got 48 hours to get out of the country because Rwanda is evidently supporting what they call the M23 revolt, which is in northern DRC. So there's some issues that are happening there, and Rwanda is the DRC is basically saying that they are going to arm their young people. Reminds me a little bit of Ukraine from the young people point of view, like give me a weapon and I'll go fight the Rwandans, or I'll go fight M23 or whatever it is. So there's some real heavy possible combat that's going to exist here right in this area. Also in Nigeria, there's so many terrorists Boko Haram and ISIS are really pounding the Abuja capital of Nigeria. So Nigeria is having a lot of problems with that, and as a matter of fact, has gone out and the U.S. has basically said, look, don't what's going to happen is they have closed the consulate and they have removed the diplomats from Abuja because of the issue of terrorism in that area. So there's a lot of issues just in these two countries, and then the Ethiopia situation up here in Mekelle and a couple other areas with the Tigray regions. They're still battling it out here. It's a shame. The African Union they're trying here, but they're not being very successful in trying to get all these conflicts to stop. And then Somalia and Mogadishu just had a series of car bombs that took out about 100 of their citizens. So they're having very big issues there. And they're asking the U.S. for help. So here we go. The U.S. now is sitting back saying, "Hey, look, we gotta help the Somalians," and so that's more money put into another country. So all of a sudden, we're up here with Ukraine, and we're doing stuff with that, and we're trying to support that area. Plus, we're supporting Poland with 101st. We're putting troops in Slovakia. We're putting troops in Romania. We used to have troops in Kyrgyzstan, of all places. Why we had them in Kyrgyzstan, I think it was because there were some issues with Afghanistan. We're trying to support them. I think those are out now from Kyrgyzstan. So all these areas are just, they're all powder kegs. And it's interesting how there's a ton of these powder kegs happening at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see how the U.S. is going to be able to figure this all out. And we got the Republicans that have a very, 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 very good chance, 81 out of 100 chance of taking over the Congress, which is the purse strings of everything. So Biden can say what he wants. The generals can say what they want. They do what they want. But if Congress doesn't support it, if Congress says you get no more money, you get no more money. So basically what's going to happen is they're going to have to either take it out of other areas like the Social Security Trust Fund, right, Dan, or other areas that exist for the ability of people just to take money, or they're going to have to stop funding all these areas or put more controls in them, which is really, I get it what Ukraine's trying to do. And I don't know what's going to happen when the winter comes and basically people are going to freeze. They've already hit, the Russians can hit whatever they want with impunity. They know that nobody's going to hit Moscow. They know nobody's going to hit Volgograd. They know nobody's going to hit Astrakhan. They know that none of those areas are going to get hit and they can just constantly bomb Kyiv and bomb Kyiv and bomb Kyiv until the infrastructure is basically a bunch of just ashes. And then they're going to have to try to rebuild that. At the same time, they're going to have to try to take back Crimea. And I'll tell you something, Sasha, if the Ukrainians are smart, and they are really smart, they're putting all their effort into trying to take back Crimea. And I'll tell you, I would support that absolutely. As a military guy and as a politician, whatever else, I'd sit there and say, you want to put all your money into taking back Crimea? Go for it. Blow the bridges up, do whatever you need to do, take back Crimea, because it's a U.S. strategic, it's great for U.S. strategy. Ukrainians take back Crimea, and we support them taking back Crimea. Now, all of a sudden, we have a port in the Black Sea and the Russians don't. And that is massively important.
Chris, just one small detail. Before you can take out Crimea, you have to take out Kherson.
That's true.
You cannot go around it.
Yep.
And that's not a very simple exercise.
No,
it's going to be very, very difficult. But once it could be accomplished, then obviously next aim is to take Crimea.
Thanks, Sasha and Chris. Just out of curiosity, because this is getting to another news story, and I'm trying to remember my, European geography and everything. Chris, I guess I'll ask you, because I think we did a piece on this particular country and everything. But how far is Albania from the whole Russia and Ukraine area? The reason I'm asking is because apparently they are very much involved in what is going on in that whole Iran conflict and everything, because they are definitely going to be holding an informal Security Council meeting on Wednesday. They can be attended by all UN members. And of course, Iran is urging countries not to attend that meeting in protest of the things that were going on in terms of violations of women's rights and things in that space, and definitely the death of the young woman there in police custody. And definitely Iran is accusing Washington of politicizing human rights, as if human rights aren't politicized on a regular basis by people all over the world and all in that space. But I was just trying to remember my kind of geography lessons, because it seems to me that that's an area that's already got its own conflicts,
Well,
but now they're interested in what's going on in Iran.
Yeah, go ahead and put up the share screen, and I'll show you. Basically, if you take a look at Albania, and you take a look at Ukraine, or even any area, the one thing that Albania has, so Albania is here. So you're talking about at least 1,000 miles from Albania to Ukraine, right?
Okay.
And you're going through Serbia, which is not very friendly at this point in time. You're going through Romania, which is somewhat friendly. Moldova, which, and this is something, Sasha, that was brought up the other day about Moldova. I'm really scared about Moldova. And the reason I'm scared about that is because they are so poor. I mean, Moldova is, I know that they have a lot of interaction with Ukraine. So I'm really hoping that Ukraine, once they survive this war and they build themselves back up, whatever else, can help out Moldova a little bit, because, man, I'll tell you, they're really hurting right between Romania and Ukraine. But we're talking about 1,000 miles between these areas. Now, Albania has their number one ally is, wait for it, China.
Oh.
So if you think they're far away from Ukraine, look at where they are look at where they are from the standpoint of their ally. And the only place that China has a base outside of China is a place called Djibouti, which is right here. That's it. That's the only place they have a base. They don't have a base anywhere else outside of China except this place, Djibouti. That's where Albania, I think Albania has always relied on China for a lot of different things, and if they want to try to ally with basically the losing, look, if you got to ally, you want to ally with a winner, right, Mark? You want to ally with a winner.
You definitely want to ally with a winner.
The winner in this case is Ukraine. I'll tell you.
No, Ukraine is totally winning. There's no doubt about that. But this is for everybody on the panel, including Sasha and anybody else that wants to answer it. I guess one of the things I've been very curious about, and yes, I was, when I was in school, a member of Amnesty International and some other human rights code organizations. But how much should we be paying attention to other people's human rights violations? Because definitely, one man's human rights violation may be something that's part of another man's culture and all in that space. But I was just wondering, how much should we be playing world police in that sense? And definitely, sometimes it can be religious differences and things along those lines. And I do know, Dan, that you definitely are a person of faith and all along those lines. But definitely, when you hear this kind of conversation going on, like what's happening with Iran, where people are concerned about their violating one group's rights or another, is that something that we should be paying attention to? Is that something that we as a nation or even as a world should be trying to regulate other people's thoughts around human rights? And are we doing a good enough job in it? Anybody take a crack at it?
I don't know. I think it's highly impractical to do anything and fight for human rights in different countries and different cultures, because whatever constitutes violation of rights, for example, in a country like the United States or France or England, is a very different concept from countries like Iran or North Korea or some other wonderful places. So whatever is working and whatever is right in a civilized world may not necessarily be a norm in this wonderful countries, as I mentioned before. And so this is kind of a concept where if we would live in ideal world, then of course you have to preserve human rights everywhere around the world as much as you can. We are not living in a perfect world, as you know. And I think the West and the United States can do only so much as to at least would be a right to preserve human rights, at least in their territories, in whether it's NATO countries or European Union, of course, United States, Australia, and others. But I don't think you can go way much beyond that. You can try, but I don't think it's practical.
Look,
Hey, Chris, what's your take on that? And Dan, but I did see that Iran is planning to hold public trials, and I'm always worried when it's public trials, particularly when it's public trials of a whole lot of people, because apparently it's going to be public trials for up to 2,000 that they have detained in protest and all along those lines. And we do know that if we want to go way back in history to like the Wild Wild West, public trials don't always come out all that well and all in that space. But I was just wondering both of your thoughts about this notion of trying to govern other people's uh, belief systems and human rights and all in that space. I think you were going to say something, Dan, and definitely Chris, if you've got any thoughts.
yeah,
Go ahead, Dan.
look, we're all God's children, right? And we're all created by the same Creator, and He's given us all inalienable rights, according to what our belief is, right? In the United States, the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights is pretty consistent with the Bill of Rights, with some differences. And those members of the United Nations that have signed on to the Declaration of Human Rights should be held accountable for those standards. And because that represents an obligation by those countries that they've made to the United Nations. Now, because of sovereignty, concept of sovereignty, it's difficult to enforce anything beyond your borders, right? Unless it's a war crime or something else, the United Nations gets involved, and you have the International Tribunal on War Crimes and that kind of thing. But then, that's another mess. I think political pressure and economic pressure and other things over the issue of human rights has been going on a long time by the United States. In China, you've got what are well, I might be saying this wrong. The Uyghurs, is that what that is?
The Uyghurs.
The Uyghurs who have been gathered up, put in camps, and they're using harvesting their organs and doing all kinds of unbelievable things. And this is basically a very peaceful people, and that's a tremendous violation of their human rights. And United Nations sits by. U.S. can only do so much. We can't police the world. I mean, it's evident we're not able to. We have our own problems in the United States with our own issues of human rights. We've murdered how many millions of babies, for example, unborn children, all in the name of personal autonomy and that kind of thing. I mean, sure, that's a crisis of major proportions. I'm sure that doesn't make God very happy. God doesn't have an abortion exception in his book, I don't think. Health of the mother, those kinds of things, but I'm not going to get into that. We have our own problems with poverty and other issues, and that we've discussed in our country. We've got enough problems at home to not continue to let illegal people into our country until we're able to get a handle on our problems with the people that we have. We can't take all of the world's problems, and that it's just impossible, and sustain our constitutional republic. And the reason why America is unique and special in the world. We're the shining light. That's why everybody's trying to get here. You don't see people going in droves to Russia or China or those other places or Iran. And there's a reason for that. You don't see many people trying to go to Cuba or Haiti. And there's reasons for that, right? And yet, we, certain parts of our country do nothing but tear down America, the America way of life, our constitutional view of liberty, and all of that, because we are spoiled as a people. We feel entitled instead of grateful to our God who has given us these freedoms. And as a result of that, we begin to act very badly and immorally and in a corrupt way, which will lead to our destruction ultimately, because that's how God works, right?
I think you're right, Dan. I agree with you on a lot of your points. I think the bottom line here, Mark, is that and Sasha, I think you would agree with this, is that by pointing inward and finding out where our issues lie, then we can share that with other countries as to how they can try to correct those situations. But we should not. I think we're hypocritical when we go out and we try to say to people in other countries, hey, do this way. If we were to go to Ukraine, I mean, for us to say Ukraine is corrupt, which, whether they were or not, for us to say that, for us to say, I'm sorry, but, we agree you should not be in the European Union. You shouldn't be in NATO because your corruption index is blah, 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 blah. Really? So maybe somebody ought to take a corruption index on the U.S. and take a look at that and see what the situation is in corruption index here, and then all of a sudden when we correct all those corruptive practices, then we can go out to other countries and say, look, this is how we corrected this, and this is how we'll help you correct yours. But we can't sit back. And in some cases, Dan, there's no way we should be going into Saudi Arabia. Interestingly enough, Trump was vilified, names were called because he went, he decided to side with Saudi Arabia. So, but he never sided with them from the standpoint of oil. He never said, look, I need you to pump this much more oil. No. Biden said, I'll tell you, when I get into presidency, Saudi Arabia is going to be a pariah. This is what we're going to treat him as, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes over hat in hand and says, oh, by the way, we need more oil. Can you do this for us? And they're going to say, screw you. No, we're not. Have fun with that.
Yeah, so, Chris, along those same lines, apparently the Supreme Court recently, as in, like, I guess either yesterday or earlier today, well, actually it was on Monday because today is Tuesday, they rejected a country's bid to shut down lawsuits in U.S. courts, and it was because of a brawl and a protest that was going on. So apparently there was a violent brawl outside of the Turkish ambassador's residence in Washington some 5 years ago that left anti-government protesters badly beaten. And so the Supreme Court has said, no, we're not going to take this case, and all along those lines. So I guess if you're doing protests.
The same thing happened in Michigan. Do you hear about that at the game?
No, but please share.
No, a bunch of players, some Michigan players got beat up by some Michigan State players, 6-on-1 violence in a tunnel, on camera, with CNN and the networks videoing the damn thing. So now there's going to be criminal charges for after the game. I mean, it's so stupid. Why?
It is.
Yeah. It's dumb.
I mean, and we talk about political violence a lot in the show, which I understand, and the bottom line on this political violence aspect is that we talk about public trials. We just talked about public trials. January 6th committee is a public trial. That is a trial that did not have to happen. If they wanted to take charges against people that busted into the Capitol, they should have arrested them and they should have charged them and put them in jail. As far as I'm concerned, the minute you broke into that Capitol, you were a criminal. Insurgency aside, or whatever they want to call it, the bottom line is that, or insurrection, is these people were criminals. They destroyed federal government property. Arrest them, put them in jail. And hey, I'm good with that, but this January 6th thing is way out of, and what's going to happen is the Republicans are going to take the Congress. Cheney is going to be out. She's gone. The other guy, Kissinger, is out. He's gone. They're going to disband the January 6th committee.
Yeah,
so
no
it's going to be a
question.
worthless effort and a lot of money wasted.
Yeah.
We could give that money to Ukraine.
Chris, what They've done that long time ago. They've arrested hundreds of people. Some of them put in jail. Some of them were convicted and were waiting trials or so on. That was not purpose of January 6th. You're misrepresenting grossly the purpose of January 6th committee.
So what's the purpose of
was
it?
To explain and to prove that all these hundreds of people who attacked the Congress, someone has to mastermind all that, organize it, all that, finance it, all that. People are not. Hold on.
Let Sasha go. Go ahead.
Listen. I want to tell you something. I'm pretty sure that no one here except me watched the January 6th hearings. And if that's the case, sorry, but you are disqualified to discuss it. Full stop.
I've watched them.
Thank you very much, Sasha.
I have watched them, Sasha, and
I did too.
From a
then you know what's happened. Do you know what they're trying to
No, we
say?
know what they're saying. We know what they're trying to spin. We also know there's no due process. There's no ability to cross-examine witnesses. There's no ability to put on
Trump is
contrary
invited
evidence.
now. Trump is invited to tell all his story, to be testified, to be asked questions, or he can ask questions. He is invited.
That's not how it works.
Probably not.
That's not how the panel works. Sasha, do you know anything about the American legal system and how it works?
Well, it works this way. If a man issues...
Maybe in Russia that's how it works.
No, in Canada, if someone is issued a subpoena, he has to rush to court, because if not, he will be brought to court by RCMP. But in the United States, some people are more equal than others, and those who are more equal than others, they can absolutely put subpoena in a garbage can and say, I'm not gonna come under subpoena. You can go to sue me for the next 17 and a half years.
I know.
So on. And that's how, is that how the American judicial system works?
That's
wonderful.
I know you have a thing to grind about him. I mean, I don't particularly like him as a person, but that doesn't answer for the abuse of power that the January 6th committee is, and the money they've spent and wasted the time of the American people in pursuing this private vendetta against Trump and his people, against another political party. That's what it is. They have no ability to.
When you're saying that you were watching the January 6 hearings, did you notice that all testimony, 100% of witnesses, they were highly placed Republican lawyers and other people, and only they were provided any factual material? Is that right?
No, that's not right.
What's not right?
Intimidation. Okay, I'm not going to get into this with you, but intimidation and threat of lawsuits and threat of jail time and other
no. All the witnesses, they were coming on their own. The well-known judges, Justice Lutting, I think that's his name. He was provided testimony on his own. He is not the man to be intimidated. Please give me a break. But
how is he involved in January 6th?
That's your right.
Sasha, how is he involved in January 6th? Or was he just a talking head brought in by the committee to say whatever he is going to say, prepared remarks?
Give him a little bit more credit to Justice Lutting. Please, as a fellow conservative, as a fellow Republican, please give him a little bit more credit. Thank you.
Nick and Lee, I saw that both of them had popped in as well. I was kind of curious, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts, because we know that there's a whole lot of polarization and political natures of a lot of these hearings, but hasn't this happened before? When I think of history and I go back to when I was a child, there was a certain hearing that was called the Watergate hearings, and a lot of ways this sounds similar to the Watergate hearings and all in that space. So what would you say is the difference between the Watergate hearings historically and these hearings now? Because both of them were trying to find the cause of something, whether that was to break in.
The president is now not in power. It's not an impeachment proceeding.
Right. Yeah. I think
it's a waste of freaking time. What it is an attack on another political party against the opponent to try to influence the electorate. That's what this is all about.
I agree with my esteemed colleague in Utah. Even though I'm not a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I agree that this is a charade and should be disbanded immediately.
Right.
And part of it is just when Gerald Ford became president, he said, we need to put this behind us. And he pardoned Nixon so they wouldn't have a charade and move forward. Notice Gerald Ford moved forward. The Democrats are moving backwards. This is going backwards. It's non-progressive. And the most important thing, Mark, which we brought up yesterday, in our economics, we have serious problems. Our Social Security system is going broke in 12 years. Our Medicare system will go broke by the end of the decade. Where are the hearings? It's because they can't solve the problem and look good in front of a camera. So all these Democrats run into the January 6 hearings where they can look good. It's disingenuous. It's bad for America. It'll always be bad. It's divisive at best and worthless to begin with. All the legal proceedings should be in front of a court of law. Once again, I agree with Dan, because this is not a court of law. This is a kangaroo hearing. And the thing is, it should be disbanded immediately. I believe with what my colleague Chris Greco said, the Republicans are going to win, sweep, and this thing will be gone. Thank God, because it's a waste. And I think it's an embarrassment for the Democratic Party. And it makes me sad to say that I'm a Democrat when they pull stunts like this.
Yeah, and the reason it's bad is because it's bad optics, and their hands are not clean.
Yeah, right. I agree.
Because their hands are not clean,
there's things that we need to deal with.
Everybody off.
Okay. There's things that the country needs to deal with,
right?
As a group, such as Medicare and Social Security going under. Okay, that we have to deal with. That we need to deal with as a group. The last thing in the world we need is this kangaroo stuff. And I'll tell you, both parties are really bad at this. They seek to divide people. The Americans aren't divided. It's the parties. And the reason they do that, they want to get into your bloody pocketbook. I get things from the Democratic Party all the time. Oh, the Republicans are bad. You need to save us from this and that and the other thing. They're full of it. Okay.
They're both full of it.
And the thing is, I'm a Democrat and I can say it. They are full of it. I got it. I don't need your garbage, and it's a one-way street. Okay, in other words, they tell me what I'm supposed to think. I can't tell them, but I do go to their political meetings, and I tell them right to their face, you guys are full of it. Oh Lord, please don't tell me that I'm wrong.
Nick, they're both full of it though, because I've also I've made the mistake or the journalistic move to actually get material from both sides, because that's what you do as a journalist.
Well, that's the reason David Walker left both parties, because you go to one party, you get a bunch of garbage. You go to the other one, you get another set of garbage, and just started listening to the garbage.
Yeah. I just put it in the garbage in my trash bin when
and anybody had independent thought would probably leave both parties.
Yeah, we try to have actual citizens running the government like it used to be way back in the day, with a little bit more diversity within that group, because it was not very diverse back in the day. But definitely we need more actual citizens. And Shaquille might.
There you go, Lee. Lee, there's your entry, man.
Not career politicians, not career politicians.
I'm supposed to go buy all their garbage. In other words, it's not like I get to choose what I want on the menu to believe and not believe. I got to believe all of it or none of it, and I don't buy that stuff.
You know, Nick. Interestingly enough, I've been doing this worldview. So I've been going to these different countries, and I've been looking at it from the CIA World Factbook. And the one place that is absolutely amazing is that the countries with the most political parties are the ones that are basically autocratic. And it's just, if like 20 or 22 political parties. So if you have like 3, you're good. If you have like 9 or 10 or 11, basically all that does is it just splits it so much that you got this autocratic person that just walks in and says, hey.
Along those same lines, because I'm a little confused about something, and maybe you can clarify it for me. And I did, as a young child, a very young child, spend time in one of these countries that's complaining. Isn't Sweden supposed to be neutral? And how can you be neutral and join a military or a organization that has some military ties and everything? Because apparently they're trying to join NATO. Turkey isn't happy about that. They've actually put in some stops on it and all of that. But I was pretty sure that I had read and had known for years that Sweden was supposed to be like one of these grand neutral countries, along with Switzerland and Finland and a couple of other ones. how much neutral can you be if you're joining a military or a partially military group and everything? Because NATO does have some military responsibilities and all
Mark,
of that.
are you
Go ahead, Lee.
serious? Are you implying that the country, which is neighboring state
Lee, I'm
with
trying.
Russia, can afford to be neutral? Really?
Well,
So
I'm just saying
when the
I'm just saying
Russian
that's their
tanks are
history.
overrunning Finland and Sweden, they're saying, "Why are you doing that? We're neutral." Well, we just feel it's a lot of fun to overrun you and put you into slavery, and it's great. So what's your problem? Okay.
Yeah, Rabishka.
Welcome to the real world.
Fair enough, but like I said, I just knew that historically they had always been neutral, but I did know that they were real close to that whole Ukrainian-Russian kind of situation. So I'm not surprised that they're trying to join NATO, and they probably do need to join NATO. By the way, Chris, you mentioned a country earlier today, and that was Moldova. Moldova was in the news because they declared a Russian embassy employee in their capital as persona non grata. So they definitely said that, no, wait a minute.
Chris, one small thing. By the way, your map that you showed before is incomplete. And I'll tell you why. Because between Moldova, okay, right here, Moldova and Ukraine, there is a certain thing which calls Tiraspol. And this is the Russian enclave there that Russia controls and would like to use if they would be in a position to attack Odessa, God forbid, by taking Nikolaev, and then they have a straight way to Odessa, and from the sea, and from the Moldova, so-called Tiraspol. It's a Dniester Republic, which is fully controlled by Russia. And by the way, when in 2014, there started to be some problems in Donbass, and Russia started to activate some bandits and private armies later on. The first ever insurgents came from Tiraspol, from this enclave of Russia near Moldova. Okay, that's where it all came.
No, that makes
very good. Thank
Lee
you.
wanted to jump in, and I know we still got about 10 minutes. So Lee, jump in.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate this. This is a pushback on Sasha, but I'm agreeing with what Nick and Dan were saying. January 6th. This is nothing about the truth, Sasha. Not at all. If it was, number one, they were to release all video from that day. Period. They're not doing that. And they're not doing that for a reason. They would interview police who let people in. Why was there any tolerance whatsoever? You don't come in the Capitol without permission. They should have arrested him first person in. No tolerance. Why were they letting people in? There were people roaming around.
They showed extensive hours and full days and some videos that were not even released previously from January 6th.
But they're not
January 6th is a small thing, really. I don't care so much about January 6th because this is bandits.
Why do you think
they were already arrested? Most of them are in jails and so on. It's a very important who masterminded that all. That was Donald Trump, who said that, no, I didn't lose election, avoiding lies, and all that came slowly through very meticulous actions, helped by his phony lawyers and so on. So then he became very close. If he would not be so stupid as he is, they had a good chance really to get the power, and he would remain president, and they would arrest all the Congress and kill half of them and so on. They were very close to that. He was just too lazy and too stupid person. Thank you. Enjoy.
You have an opinion. I can see that.
Sasha, this has nothing to do with Trump. You have Americans in jail, solitary confinement, no bail, over a year, no trial, over
political
a year.
Prisoners.
It's not a trial. It never meant to be trial. It's preparing the material. A, for American public. B, for no. It's a material. It's a straightforward material for Attorney General. Whether he's using or not, that's another story.
Let the Attorney General do it.
There. Material is there for other trials of his or so on. So he will spend the rest of his days with all this criminal and civil and other procedures. He will be penniless by the time that he'll die one day. He
Oh,
could
you
die
really
one
love the
day.
guy, don't you?
No, he
Trump
won't, because
could
the
be
kangaroo
dead
Not
court will
even
be
a
anytime
gone
now.
by the
Canadian.
end of the
Why
year.
the hell
So
do you
he will be
care?
left penniless.
Hey,
The
hold on a
kangaroo
second.
court
Hold
will
on a
be gone
Enjoy.
second.
by the end of
We
the
all
year.
love
Hold on.
The
Hold on a
kangaroo
second.
court's
Not
going
a
to hop into
trial. Americans
Australia.
are.
It's gone.
Hold on a second. Hey, Dan, you just used the term that I had heard, and you did correctly label me as a progressive and everything, but you just used a term that I had not heard that much since the 70s and all in that space. And I know some folks in my political camp that would say that there are tons of political prisoners that are in the United States on,
You're
and yes,
right,
I'm going to
and
use
I
your
agree.
phrase as
There
well, both
are.
sides of the aisle, because I know some move people and aim that would be like, hey, we're political prisoners also. So are you trying to say that there are various political prisoners in the United
No,
States and that we need to be aware of that?
Yeah,
Because a
I
lot of
think
times
that's
people in the
true.
nation
I
would
think
not think that there are political prisoners in the U.S. So, do we have a lot of political prisoners?
I think we do. I think we do. Now, if people actually committed violent acts, then they were imprisoned for those acts, and so those aren't political prisoners. Most of these people just were there and were expressing a viewpoint. They were encouraged to go in by the police. They had FBI implants and other people there that didn't belong there. And it is, like I said, Sasha, with all due respect to your opinion, the January 6th committee is a charade for CNN. It's sort of like a docudrama put on by Michael Moore. I mean, it really is a joke, and most people see it for what it is.
No, who just
Except,
saying, and just really quickly, because like I said, we are winding down everything. So, Dan, if somebody does a protest where they know that they are going to be arrested and that is part of the protest step, then if that action takes place, then by nature are they political prisoners? Because that would mean that Reverend Barber and the Moral Monday people, when they were in jail, were political prisoners. That means that anybody in the civil rights movement, when they did the sit-ins, were political prisoners as
yeah,
well.
they were. If they were arrested for expressing an opinion and doing nothing more than sitting. It's a political or political prisoners. And I agree that there was a lot of that during the civil rights movement. People were jailed, people were murdered. It's a travesty that happened in our country. And thank goodness we're past most of that now. What we need to do is begin to think of each other as brothers and sisters with a common purpose as Americans, so that we can understand that this country is blessed, and that we need to strive to be good citizens, do our duty, work in our jobs, and take care of our families, and stop creating all of this violence and anger and angst and division, because it is not constructive for our country. It's bad for our people.
Well, along those lines, it does look like it's about time to wrap everything up. Chris and everybody, you got to a couple of issues that were in the news that I was going to bring up, and we can bring it back up in the news tomorrow as well, because apparently there is a peace talk going on between Ethiopia and Tigray. So hopefully that will bring an end to that very long conflict and all along those lines. And you mentioned Rwanda, and thousands are joining anti-Rwanda protests in the DR's Congo's Goma, and definitely there's more violence against journalists this time in Haiti. And we do know that Haiti's been in the news as well. So definitely that is some of the news that we did not get to. We also didn't get to one of our favorite topics, but it'll be in there for a while because that Supreme Court case ain't going nowhere, which is around affirmative action and whether it will be something that needs to be turned back or whether it's something that needs to be enhanced, or how we're going to deal with it, and all in that space. I think 9 states have made some changes and maybe even gotten rid of their affirmative action programs from what I was seeing in the news and all along those lines. But we can find more about that and get more into that news story on Wednesday, which will be the middle of the week, or as some people call it in the world, hump day. So definitely we'll see how that all plays out. And definitely is amazing having my good friends here and us having this great conversation. I know that definitely Nick and I believe, Sasha, have gone over to talk about Russia, China, and Ukraine, because that show is going on right about now and all in that space. So I'm going to look for our lovely outro that goes with the intro that we had earlier, and we're ready to get on out of here and all in that space. But fun conversation, amazingly good conversation, and look forward to seeing y'all again on tomorrow and having more of these great conversations.
Take care, guys. Thank you.